Hello, everyone, and welcome to What We Know. Today, we are going to be talking about a Kickstarter that is out right now and is out for the next few days. So you do not have time to wait to get up a part of this. You have to be a part of it right now, which is ProgCore. And as you know, on this show, What We Know, we talk about something that we know about, or if we don't know anything about it, we bring people that do know about it. Now, Sam and I usually are the people that know absolutely nothing about it, but Sam is actually involved with ProgCore a little bit. But our main key advisors of knowledge upon this is David Nett and Todd Stashwich. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Jake.
Let's get right into it and ask. What are you most known for? If someone woke up today and has no idea who David Nett and Todd Stashwich is, who are you?
I am an actor and a writer, father, husband in Los Angeles, California. Known for mostly, probably most people would know me from Star Trek Season 3 of Picard, where I played Captain Liam Shaw of the Starship Titan. Also 12 Monkeys. I played the role of Deacon on that show. Improviser from Chicago, Second City. Currently writing on a Marvel project, video game called 1943 Rise of Hydra. So those are highlight Wikipedia stuff, but beyond that, Dungeons & Dragons enthusiast, RPG person, 2 delightful children, married for almost 27 years.
I mean, not to go over your film credits of what you've done, but I have to mention my favorite appearance of you, which is on Psych. But every time it pops up, I'm
Frank
like...
Jim Ogletree. He trained carrier pigeons.
Sure.
It's
always
to
the most obscure, like, Psych fans are out there and they know it, and I will get Ogletree like yelled to me across a con floor.
That is my wife.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, my wife
stopped and said hello.
My wife loves Psych. Has multiple pieces of artwork, including Doctor Who and Psych mashups. But we're not here to talk about me.
Sign them, Jake.
You look, hold on. Don't get that for free. That's why people sign up for the Kickstarter.
Oh, I didn't say it was free.
All right. What about you, David? Where would people know you from?
I'm an actor and a writer as well. My career it never went to where Todd's did, but I did a web series in 2019. Was my first big sort of indie project called Gold. That was about professional Dungeons and Dragons players in the early web series days. We won some awards with that and with Night of the Zombie King. And since then, I have worked on and off in sort of nerd media. I wrote for Geek and Sundry for a long time. I ran a couple of shows there. Sam and I did a show together in the early days there. Since I did a thing for Shout Factory called Always a Sword for Geek and Sundry, I wrote all the seasons of Starter Kit and a show called Max Hit Points there. And so I've been bopping in and out of nerd media for a while. That's me. I also am married with a little baby girl who's 20 months old right now and waiting at home while we do this.
And the co-owner / co-founder of the place in which I got to actually meet you at, which is...
So it's Hero's Journey Fitness. I'm actually in my office at Hero's Journey right now. And so it's a gym for nerds and geeks and people who are uncomfortable with traditional fitness environments. We create workouts that everybody can work out together, regardless of your experience or how intense you want that workout to be. We can adjust every workout and adapt for every person who comes through our doors, and we all work out together and get strong together and celebrate our nerdhoods. So that's Hero's Journey Fitness in Burbank. Todd is a member. Jake is a member. Sam is actually one of our advisors. So this is a stacked panel here, really.
Look, I'm
all insiders.
All right. So the next question I'm going to bring up now that people know who you are, and since we are talking about ProgCore, which is a dark fantasy TTRPG supplement.
The full title is ProgCore Fantasy Dark Age of Fear. THEER.
So
that's the full title.
With that full title, what is your first TTRPG memory?
I was gonna say, so there's sort of two. One of them is not the member is being invited to the game. I was in 7th grade at the science fair, which was at the local mall, and the person who was next to me at the science fair. By the way, I won several awards at that science fair. In case you were keeping track.
Surprise.
Yeah, and the guy who was next to me at the booth, I also had a broken arm. So I had a broken arm and won several awards at the science fair with my big glasses. And the guy who was next to me had his project, and we were stuck there together all day. I didn't know him. He was a new kid at school, a year older than me. And while we got talking and everything, he invited me to come play Dungeons and Dragons with him and his brother and another of their friends. And so that's how I ended up playing Dungeons and Dragons in my tiny little town, was the guy next to me at the science fair. And then my first real memory is the first spell that my character, Lexall Flagstaff, cast, because we were facing up against a frost giant riding a mammoth. I was the beginning of Against the Giants. And I had joined a campaign like really deep into the campaign. They were all 10th or 11th or 12th level or something like that. And Lexall, because I couldn't choose I was so excited to play. I was a drow elf fighter mage thief. None of those are a good combination. It's a very janky character, and but I cast my first spell, which was Melf's Minute Meteors, with the hope that it would start the mammoth's hair on fire. And nobody at the table had ever seen that spell cast before, so I felt really good. And then when I met Luke Gygax for the first time, who played Melf, who created Melf with his dad Gary Gygax, I got to tell him that my first spell I ever cast in the game was Melf's Minute Meteors.
78. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. So 1978, Midwestern boy. I was in my older, cooler cousin Tori's basement apartment, and he invited me and my cousin just to hang out with him because all the adults were upstairs. I mean, he was older, like played guitar and smoked weed, and so I think I was 78. I would have been 10. He invites me downstairs into his apartment. He's like, "Hey, let's hang out. I'm going to show you some stuff." And so he takes out the dice and he puts them down. And he takes out a piece of paper and a pencil. He's rolling up a character. He had his player's handbook there, and I was like, and then of course he took it out. And so I was like, "What are you doing? What is all of that?" And he's like, "This is Dungeons and Dragons." And then I'm like, "Go on." And somehow he was like, "Well, like you watch The Hobbit," because this was 78, so it was a year after the Rankin and Bass Hobbit came out. I go, "Yeah." He goes, "It's like that, but you play in it." I'm like, "You were saying?" And so I'm trying to connect like how the Rankin and Bass Hobbit connects to these dice and this piece of paper. And so just a year later now, it's a brush fire amongst all of us preteens in the late 70s, and now so me and my buddy Jim and Matt and my cousin Scott all gathering in our wood panel basement, rolling dice, playing D&D, and then my cousin Scott and I would go to camp up in Lake Geneva, which was just up the road from the dungeon, the TSR headquarters dungeon hobby shop. So in my brain, like, we're expecting a drawbridge and torches, but it was just wire mini racks and nerds. But it was still no less of a pilgrimage to walk to this place and get a mini, which were still like lead back then. And I think they were lead. No, they were probably pewter. I'm going to say lead because it was the 80s, so everything was lead. And so I played pretty aggressively the basic expert and then AD&D edition for a long time, and then I was the kid with a vivid imagination succumbed to the Satanic Panic, and then didn't come back to it till 5e.
Well, thank you for returning to the panic. We're all happier for having you as part of our infernal machinations.
Oh, and, I'm here to serve the Dark Lord.
It's important.
Honestly, they're both such lovely first memories, and in looking at the materials in ProgCore, it seems like so much of that work is about capturing some of the light of those first experiences. What actually inspired y'all to create this project? What was its inception?
Well, it's sort of a really crooked, interesting road, because it started with David and I were invited to create a pitch for a potential D&D comic, and then that because industry doesn't happen, right? So then this opportunity going, hey, what if you did all of that work, but then changed it so that it was your own IP? And then we were like, oh, well, with the rules off, like with the rails off and the IP being our own, what would that be? Which then got us really dipping into our favorite influences of the dark fantasy of the 70s and 80s. What are the things that lit the pilot light in us? So those were kind of the beginnings of this idea.
Yeah, and then we were running with that. We had a handful more pitches. One of the companies we pitched to was like, it would be great. We love this pitch. If you guys would go out and create a game, and it became popular, and then you brought the pitch back to us, we would love to make this, because it's Los Angeles, so they wanted us to create IP that they could then exploit. Which is absurd, but it did get us talking about, what could this thing be? What do we really want to do with this? And then what might that look like? And so we had lots of conversations, and I guess these conversations started about the middle of last year. And very quickly we knew we didn't want to make a game per se. We have so many friends who are game designers and game creators. We understand the work that entails, and neither of us were interested in at least that exact work. Not that we weren't interested in work, but not that work. But what we really became interested in is we were talking about stuff, and we had some other friends that were whispering in our ears about this at the time, is the way that we feel when we play and our approach to games in general, and fantasy games. And the fact that we're all sort of chasing the feelings in our stomach that we had when we first started to play, whether you first started to play 30, 40 years ago, or you first started to play 5 or 10 years ago, or even last year, those first sessions, when you're still sort of getting your bearings and anything can happen and you don't know what to expect, the excitement that sort of burns in your belly and in your chest, it's hard to find as we understand our games better, and as we get deeper into the meta game, and as we become more comfortable with the mechanics of a game and the act of playing, some of that fire is just harder to find. And so what we really decided we wanted to do was put together, a philosophy, a group of guidelines, tips and tricks, things that you can do at the table, whether you are a player or a GM, to light that fire in your belly again, to try to evoke those feelings from when you first played. And we coupled that then with our game world, which is called Fear in its dark age, which is designed for this ProgCore, and away we went.
For me, when I was noodling on, like, what are those feelings if somebody says fantasy to me? And as I started musing, I'm like, well, when I feel those butterflies, it returns me to the Rankin and Bass Hobbit. It returns me to Legend and Excalibur and Dragon Slayer and all that music I was listening to back then, which was all that prog music of Kansas and Styx and Zeppelin and Yes and Tangerine Dream. And then as I mused on that, I'm like, oh, this is like a genre of fantasy in itself, where in the same way, if you say steampunk, it sounds like this and it looks like this and these are the stories and this is the music. If you say cyberpunk, this is the music. And so musing on that, I'm like, okay, if we put brackets around that feeling of fantasy, that's where the term ProgCore came from. So it is, because the idea of progressive music at the time was taking a lot of medieval stories and medieval sounds and singing about the hobbits, if you ask Robert Plant, but then pushing them through electric guitars and synthesizers and reinventing them in a different way with modern tools. So what we like to say is our project is old wine in new bottles.
Other way around.
New wine in old bottles.
That's what we say. And then the other part of it too, the prog part of prog rock or ProgCore, as I was saying, is progressive. It's the danger when you lean on nostalgia from things from the 70s and the 80s is that contextually from that time, you are stepping on lots of landmines of the bigotries of society, of racism, of sexism, of homophobia. It is endemic to the age in which those things are created, and so it becomes systemic to the fabric in which those games are built. And so we wanted to make sure that the progressive was part of what we're doing, because when we reach back and lean on that nostalgia, our responsibility is to make sure that we understand. We've been saying lately that those weren't the good old days for everyone, and we want to make sure these are the good old days for as many people as possible. So we can touch that nostalgia and bring from it what's beautiful and what we loved, but with the conscious understanding that those things entire to themselves are not going to be the hearty memories for everybody the way that they were for us. And so we need to take what's beautiful there.
They're not necessary for good storytelling.
All those stories from many different perspectives now, because that was 50 years ago. And we have new eyes and new understandings.
So all of these noodlings and these musings of the past year ultimately crystallized into the ProgCore that is up on Kickstarter now. So for the people, what is an elevator pitch for ProgCore? What is it that has crystallized from all of these ideas into a project that you can back now?
It is a well, we our elevator pitch is it is a multimedia dark fantasy TTRPG experience. And so when we say multimedia, we're referring to the fact that we didn't want to just make a book. I have already kickstarted a TTRPG book with Mystic Libations. It's like, well, that was fun and it did great, but in order for this to capture that Gestalt experience that we're trying to tap into, it needed to have many heads. It needed to be ProgCore music or prog rock music. It needed to be an animation. It needed to be a source book and stories, and it needed to be art. And then one of the big things is to be able to show people in action what this will look like while we're playing it. So David?
Yeah.
I'm teeing him up.
So I've been long trying. The reason Todd teed that up to me is I have been long pitching around various media groups about this. What I have been calling a documentary for a long time, a documentary about play, that we now call a documentary actual play, and it is the actual play movement, as you guys are well aware and well part of, has become this like rich source of story and entertainment and interaction and this beautiful communication of the art of role-playing games to so many people over the last decade or so, but out of necessity, because sing and say a weekly game or even a monthly game streamed online, the production of those things is not what I would call immersive. It's a little presentational. We're all sitting facing our cameras. I've been on plenty of these as well. We're sitting facing our cameras. We're playing together as best we can. There are awkward pauses because some people's audio is out of sync, and so it's a sort of a difficult experience, and it's very different, at least from what I have experienced and felt in my almost 40 years of playing around the table. So what I've been pitching around for a long time as a documentary style actual play is bringing in a documentary footage crew, putting cameras all over the room, all over the table, getting 15, 20, 30, if we're lucky, camera POVs plus a couple of bigger cameras, and sitting down a group of friends in a regular play space around a table that you would play at. This will be in Todd's Nerd Lair, which is on the other side of that wall behind him, and playing a game with your friends and using groups of microphones and groups of cameras to really create an immersive experience so that everybody watching feels like you're at the table with the people who are playing, and you can get the experience of pushing away from the table, the room, and getting a snack and removing yourself. One of the big things I do when I play a lot is remove myself back from the table so I can see everybody and sort of contemplate what's going on. As a GM, I stand up a lot and sit down and roam a little bit, which not everybody can do, and certainly on stream you can't. And so creating an environment where we can capture all of that, and the game begins to feel very organic, again, to the experiences that I have had playing in person with my friends. And so that's been the goal of this. And of course, we'll have some interviews and stuff smattered throughout there. We got lots of B-roll, we got lots of cameras. And so really turning it into a documentary experience, as you can imagine, of course. This is not a sustainable thing that could be like a weekly game. It's wildly expensive to produce. And so a big part of this was raising the funds to produce that documentary actual.
Now, I actually had a question further on that was about that, of basically like, it said that it's a documentary style actual play. What is that? I no longer need to ask that question because you just answered it. So instead, I'm going to move on to the next question. So the world in which you guys are working in is fear, right? Something
THEER. Everybody thinks we're saying fear.
I see. I got the spelling. I got it down. I actually looked.
It's just for those playing at home.
Lots of time correcting closed captions in our videos. Lots of closed caption correcting time.
Makes sense. The thing that gets me the most excited about a Kickstarter or something like that is the world in which you're creating, and something that I always find interesting is not necessarily what you think other people will find interesting, but what do you find interesting or cool about that world?
So for me, the big thing is that we chose to have it in the dark age. The age of fear that we are setting our game in is a civilization rising from the ashes of a previous civilization. There was a gilded age of magic. It collapsed through some bad actions on the parts of the magic practitioners, and fear has plummeted into a dark age. And so you've got this where history, geography is a little bit unknown, where there's mystery built into your surroundings. Most people haven't traveled more than 50 miles from where they were born. The geography of this sprawling land that was once a great empire is uncertain, because all you've got are the stories of whatever bards came through town. The exactitude of history is in question, because again, everything in your life is told to you through stories. And so there's an environment where once you have, as an adventurer, once you have left the confines of sort of the familiar place where you live, anything could happen, and much is unknown. That was exciting to me.
Because in order to, and this is also going to dip into like the philosophy behind it, I like the idea of characters coming from small beginnings. Again, when I'm attracted to the stories, we go to the easy ones. Luke Skywalker, he was a farmer. Like Frodo, he was a book reader under trees. Like simple people who did simple things, and the majority of people from fear, farmers, tradesmen, blacksmiths, carving out their lives, and then whether it's calamity, whether it's circumstance, whether it was war or something, pushes people out of their comfort zone and into a world that is treacherous, that is dangerous. I think, and it's a very attractive thing, and I think video games have informed this a lot, but I think a lot of games now are power fantasy. It is about I say it's more akin to the Avengers than it is to Lord of the Rings. And I think simplifying the world and yet filling it with intrigue, filling it with mystery, filling it with danger. We don't know what's around the corner. These are uncharted lands for most of these adventurers, and that's exciting to me.
Here, Todd and I is very similar to the way that we put together ProgCore. What from these games, what from these stories do we truly love? And that's our three pillars of ProgCore. Ultimately, we listed a whole bunch of things that we wanted in our role-playing games and that we wanted in our stories. And we listed them out, and there were, 75 of them. And then my information architect brain recategorizes them. And we came out with these three pillars, which are wonder, mystery, and danger. And so that's what ProgCore is built around. That's what the guides and tips and tricks for ProgCore style play are built around. It's also what our world of fear is built around. It's a world of wonder. You're passing and staring up at statues and bridges. I think of the Argonath in Lord of the Rings, things that couldn't be made now. The magic to make them is gone from the world, and yet you still live beside them. And the world's filled with wonder in that way. You think about mystery, again, not knowing really how the world works beyond your front door, what might be lurking there. And then, of course, danger. It's a world where, because you don't know, it's fraught with danger, where magic is relatively rare. It's practiced, but because of the nature of the calamity, the dragon wrath that came before, which was caused by stealing magic from the dragons.
Man's folly, yeah.
Yeah, and the dragons becoming angry about it. Magic is viewed with suspicion. There are still practitioners, but it's viewed with suspicion. It's practiced in secret. And so you still get players who get to play with that magic, regardless whatever game system you may play in. Yeah. You're playing with the magic and stuff, but the world is suspicious of you when you do. And so there's just all of these layers of the things that we loved to play in that we have then constructed in our philosophy and then the world that reflects that.
I love the simple moment in Lord of the Rings when Samwise is like, "Are we going to get to see elves?" Like this idea that elves were this extraordinary thing that this hobbit could encounter, and when Bilbo and the dwarves encountered Beorn, it was like, "What is that?" And I think there's a way to approach the game, because I was playing a game last night and somebody goes, "Oh, well, it's probably a flesh golem." I'm like, but would you know that? Would your character know that? Or would they be horrified at this thing? And so some of the responsibility is on us as GMs and how we describe something, so that it might not be obvious to them that it's a dire wolf or an owl bear, because we metagame so completely, so much, because we've been living with this tower of books for so long that we immediately, as the player, go, "Oh, I get what that is. I know what that is, and I kind of know how to handle it." Yeah.
But then it's also it's responsibility for the player as well. And we talk about ProgCore a lot as being agreement between the player and the GM. Like anything that you do in your game, when you talk in like a session 0, or you talk with your party about like what kind of a game is this going to be. Choosing to make this a ProgCore fantasy style game means that we're going to embrace certain things. And as a player, though you understand that's an owlbear, even if the GM tries to disguise it or tries to make it mysterious, you can guess that it's an owlbear. But it's if you play ProgCore style, it becomes incumbent upon you to play your character's knowledge, not your knowledge. Now, this isn't new stuff, by the way. Like, we're not inventing these things. We're compiling and curating these ideas that we've been playing with for 40 years with the great gamers that we came up with, the great gamers that we encounter all the time, because we're lucky enough to play with lots of people. So this is curated more than invented. It's all bundled together. It's a very specific thing, and it's a very specific agreement and a way to play the game, again, in search of those butterflies in your stomach feelings of excitement that are, again, sometimes elusive. I feel like we talk a long time. I know that because I'm out of sync, I talk a long time and everybody nods along with it, but I feel like I talked a long.
It's okay. It's completely okay. You know, we're here interviewing you, asking you questions. So if Sam and I were talking more there, that means that the interview is going very poorly.
So as you've been talking about the pillars of ProgCore, I've heard you make a lot of references to metagaming, to built-up knowledge from years of experience that both of you very much have, and seems to be a driving force behind the project. So who is ProgCore for? Is it for players who are new and seeking to lay foundations, or is this a project that is also, if not more, for people who are trying to scrape some of those layers away?
I'm going to say
who
both.
Should check out this project?
I'm going to say both, right? So I think I ran a game for on Sunday for some 11-year-olds, but trying to introduce the game to them from this starting point. And literally, one of the players, 11-year-old, goes, "Oh, I wrote a very long backstory," and then I'm doing the preamble. I'm like, "You all have been working together for a long time. You're a well-oiled machine, and you've been traveling." And then this child went, "My character wouldn't do that." Like, right out of the gate, before we'd rolled any dice or knew what the adventure was, they said, "I don't trust people, so therefore I would." And then you've got to go. And then my daughter deftly goes, "Maybe you don't trust the outside world and you only trust us, because this is going to be a very short game if you don't want to go on this adventure with us."
Nicely done.
So in answer to your question, I think it can. I think it can be both. I think it can be, for me, it is about, like you just said, simplifying things, scraping off a lot of the things that we suddenly have piled on, and going, "Oh, okay, this is kind of maybe a way to burn clean in a different way," and or I've never played before, and here's a way to start playing, which I think you will have a lot of fun playing, because that's the only reason we're here, is to have a good time.
The G is for game.
Trying to find ways to make it better. Yeah, the G is for game.
Yeah, and I'll double down on what Todd said. That I think it is for everybody who wants to play this kind of game. And for some of us, as you said, Sam, who are laboring under 40 years of accumulated knowledge, there's certain things we have to agree to do to play this kind of game. But for new people, there's things you have to agree to do to play this kind of game as well. And this is, Todd just gave a great example of that. You have to decide that your character their backstory will emerge through play rather than from, several weeks of laborious writing in your notebook. Both of those things, which direction do you want to roll?
Kind of going back to the Kickstarter in itself, right? We've kind of understand who the Kickstarter is for. We understand, what ProgCore is. ProgCore Fantasy is, but there is a staggering amount of things that people would be getting if they back this. And now, I'm not even talking at like high tiers. The things in which you guys are trying to bring forward is massive. Can you talk about the cool things that you're bringing? Like you had mentioned the source book, you mentioned the documentary, but that's far from the only things that you want to bring.
At the foundational level, there are 4 things that we're building, just the first 4. And it's a guidebook, we're calling it the ProgCore Fantasy Dark Age of Theater source book, that is about ProgCore play and about the world of theater, especially told through story. And then we've got the actual play that we talked about, the documentary actual play. We have an animated show about this very eloquently, because this was we decided what we wanted to make that was the core of the project, and while we agreed on all 4 of these things, the animated short was the thing that Todd leaned into from the very beginning. And I just say, in the style of that 70s and 80s animation that we love, that hand-drawn 2D animation that got our blood.
There's something really painterly about a lot of that old animation. Like, the backgrounds are all these beautiful watercolors. If you think of like The Last Unicorn, and you think of Bakshi's Lord of the Rings and Wizards, and my son is a professional animator, and he looks like he stepped out of a photo of all the guys that were working on ILM. Like he's got a mustache to here, his hair is down to here. He literally drives a van, and he dresses this. So he really, his gut understands this stuff, and so he started noodling some of the drawings, and he nailed it, immediately nailed it. And then Bob Eggleton did the backgrounds for us, and he understood deeply that painterly watercolor quality, and we don't see it a lot anymore. Like, we live in a world of Pixar, we live in a world of anime, we live in a world of Adventure Time, but this kind of is a bit of a forgotten art right now, and it's gorgeous. And for me, when I was playing D&D, this is what it felt like to me. The shadows were very dark, and what was around the corner was very dangerous. and it was a scary, harsh world, and yet intriguing with all that really cool music underneath it. And so the opportunity to go, I want to create something new that gives maybe other people the feelings that I got when I was seeing that stuff as a boy, in the same way that like Lucas and Spielberg, yes, I'm comparing us to them, but they were like, let's make Raiders, but we wanted to feel like those serials that we grew up with, but we're going to put it through a new lens with new tools. I want to do the same thing with this animation.
Literally, one of the questions I have on here is animation shorts are very expensive and hard to put together. Why is it so important? And whose baby is it? And clearly, we know that now.
Yeah. Well, and I think, but it's worth pointing out, it is incredibly expensive, as are most of the pieces of this. And we have a very high floor for the Kickstarter. It's a sprawling project. We're battling toward the finish line right now. But yeah, these are expensive pieces of art, all of these. If we fund at the base level, this will be a like 5 to 8 minute animated short. That's how much money we will have at the very discounted rate our friends who are animators and voice artists are giving us. If we can fund at a higher levels, we will expand that as well as expanding the other pieces of it. But it is an important point, I think, because whether it's a role-playing game source book or a short film Kickstarter, people, when we care about paying artists, people misunderstand where I think the money goes for lots of these projects. And so we are all, and the people we're working with, really good at making a dollar in my shoes many times, doing independent projects, trying to make a dollar stretch on a film set. I've done that for my whole career. We've made books on shoestrings. We've produced music on shoestrings, not we specifically, but Jason Charles Miller. We've got an animation team who's done this as well. Like we've done all this indie work. We know how to do it, but it still costs money, even if at a much lower rate than it would be to go through a studio.
Fourth piece that you have attached to this project is a soundtrack. You have both Jason Charles Miller and Geoffrey Schumann attached to the soundtrack. What drove you to reaching out to them to be a part of this project? And hey, I know them is a completely acceptable answer.
Well, no, more specifically, and the same with every aspect of the project. We went to people who were also gamers. So it's not that Geoffrey and Jason were just talented musicians. They got it. When I said to both of them, this is the vibe, these are the bands, and this is the thing, and Geoffrey like immediately knew. He's like, Tangerine Dream, but like he just started naming, and these are the types of synths that they were using, and these were the reverbs, and blah blah blah, blah. And then Jason Charles, he's like, this is it. These soaring, like overwrought, wonderful ballads from the day, as well as the electric guitar support. But the same thing with our animators. We went to Sean Bishop, who's our animation director, and he just began to drool when we were like, and he's played D&D. Like, we want to tap into that thing. So going back to the butterflies, these cause butterflies in all of the people. When I say, hey, Jason Charles, do you want to do a prog rock soundtrack? He's like, yeah, please. And they're all gamers, so we speak that language.
Yeah. When we start talking about the soundtracks that we think about for Legend and Lady Hawk and like these very specific vibes, these fantasy stories with these really specific Crawl synthy soundtrack vibes, yeah, I got them excited, and so yeah, it's important. But to your point, Jake, too, whenever you're doing independent work, finding people that you know and trust is an important part of that. We are, Todd and I, very lucky that in the last 20 plus years for each of us, we have spent our time among some of the most skilled, most talented, creative, smart, just thoughtful people who are hungry to do cool things.
And everybody that we invited on board were just ready to play, and they're gnawing at the bit as well to either put pen to paper or start doing drawings or start making music. They're all like stallions in the gate. It's very exciting.
Honestly, the hardest thing about something collaborative artists at heart, Todd and I, is not asking everybody. The hardest thing is that there's so many people we would love to do this with, so many people we could ask for help. There will be more people than are just listed on our collaborators list, of course. If we get to do this thing, we need many more hands on deck. But stopping asking people before we funded the stupid thing was one of the hardest things we had to do.
Well, all the more so, I'm happy to have snuck in an imposter among an otherwise illustrious number.
Yeah. No, I mean...
But if ProgCore is successfully funded, you will have support for a multimedia experience across multiple domains. And ultimately, what do you hope its impact will be? If everything goes the way you're hoping, what do you want from ProgCore Fantasy?
Literally as simple as joy. Like, that is why I'm an entertainer.
Just that.
Way back. Like, I just want to bring joy to people. I want to use my hands and my brain and my friends to make things that delight people. Because I was delighted. Because delight is what put me in the arts in the first place and turned me into a creator. And there is a certain amount of, like, this is what I'm here for, is to make things that delight humans. That's it. Like, and then pay them to do it. Pay the artists and the writers and everybody to do it, so that we can all make money making things that delight people.
The best gifts that you can ever give anybody in your life are the ones that you would like to receive. These are things that we are deeply passionate about and that we want to make and want to see in the world. And we, not just being Todd and me, but I think the whole group of our collaborators. And so, yeah, if we can bring joy to people by bringing forth the things that we would like to have in the world, I think that would be glorious. I think there's another little responsibility that we talked about in the beginning too, and that's to demonstrate that you can tell these kinds of stories and you can have this kind of dark fantasy and tell it from lots of different viewpoints and not leave anyone out, and not, frankly. And being able to demonstrate that will be important to us.
If you have been brought joy by today's episode, please give this video a like and subscribe, and let us know what you think of ProgCore in the comments below. You can also catch me and Jake on twitch.tv/althaven_, where we stream RPG content. You can also join the conversation on our Althaven Discord. If you want to support us, you can do so on coffee.com/althaven, but don't forget to check out ProgCore's Kickstarter. The link is in the description below. But until next time, keep it weird, Internet.